What if the solution to Florida's python crisis wasn't science or policy, but unleashing thousands of fearless, snake-eating marauders? Honey badgers, so reckless they fight lions, sound like the perfect fix. Could they really be saviors, or the next unstoppable invader, rewriting the Everglades in their own violent image? Today, we explore the madness of this idea. Florida's swamps are like a living museum of wildlife. For thousands of years, the Everglades thrived as a delicate balance of predator and prey, plants and water, life and death. This isn't just another stretch of wetlands. It's one of the most unique ecosystems on the planet, often called the River of Grass. Alligators bask along the banks, wading birds sweep low across the water, and endangered species like the Florida panther still stalk through the shadows. It's a paradise, but one that has always walked a razor's edge. Then came a disruption that would change everything, an invasion, not of people, but of snakes. Massive snakes that were never supposed to be here, the Burmese python. At first it seemed like a strange accident, an exotic pet gone rogue in the wild. But over time, what started as a handful of escaped snakes grew into an unstoppable force. Now, they rule where native predators once held sway. The consequences have been staggering. Scientists studying the Everglades noticed entire populations vanishing before their eyes. In some areas, raccoons, once so common they were practically pests, declined by an astonishing 99%. Opossums dropped by nearly the same margin. Bobcats, stealthy hunters that once prowled these swamps, fell by almost 90%. And it wasn't just mammals. Birds, reptiles, even turtles faced relentless pressure. In the span of just a few decades, Florida's natural balance was collapsing. And the pythons didn't come alone. Other invaders, green anacondas, boas, and smaller exotic snakes, crept into the ecosystem, silently expanding their range. Together, they transformed the Everglades into something unrecognizable, a battlefield where native wildlife barely stands a chance. To understand how serious this problem is, picture this. Scientists estimate there are already tens of thousands of Burmese pythons living wild in Florida. Each one is capable of swallowing prey as large as a deer. And unlike native predators, these snakes face almost no natural enemies. Once they reach adulthood, they're virtually untouchable. For Florida, this isn't just an ecological concern. It's a full-blown crisis. The Everglades is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a biodiversity hotspot, and a cornerstone of the state's identity. But with every passing year, more of its original inhabitants vanish, leaving behind an emptier, quieter wilderness. The Burmese python isn't just another snake. It's a heavyweight from Southeast Asia, built to crush and swallow prey whole. Adults commonly stretch over 16 feet, with the record in Florida hitting nearly 19 feet long. That's the size of a small car, coiled muscle with fangs at one end. When a predator like that sets up shop in a new environment, the rules of the ecosystem change overnight. And that's exactly what's happened in Florida. These snakes, once exotic pets brought in through the wildlife trade, found freedom in the swamps. Hurricanes knocked over reptile breeding facilities, careless owners released them when they grew too big, and some simply escaped into the wild. However it started, the result is the same. Florida became a perfect home. Warm wetlands, endless prey, no natural predators. For a python, it's paradise. Once established, they multiplied. A female python can lay over 50 eggs at a time, and with no one to stop them, hatchlings spread further every season. Researchers now believe there are thousands slithering across South Florida, with estimates ranging as high as 100,000. Some parts of the Everglades are so overrun that spotting a python is easier than seeing a raccoon, and they aren't alone. Green anacondas, South America's river giants, have been confirmed in Florida, along with boa constrictors and other large snakes. While the Burmese python steals most of the headlines, these cousins are quietly spreading their territory too. Together, they've built an army of predators that the local wildlife never evolved to resist. The impact is written across the Everglades. Ground-nesting birds vanish when pythons raid their eggs. Marsh rabbits, foxes, and even deer are swallowed whole. Studies show drops in nearly every small and mid-sized mammal across the region. Even the top predators, alligators, are forced into a deadly rivalry. Photographs exist of gators locked in combat with giant pythons, each capable of killing the other. It's a clash of titans, but one happening far too often for comfort. Florida hasn't ignored the problem. Millions of dollars have been poured into removal programs. In 2023 alone, the state invested over $3 million into python eradication efforts. There are bounty hunters paid by the foot, organized snake roundups, and scientific research teams testing new tracking technologies. And yet, despite all this, the numbers barely budge. If the Burmese python has turned Florida's paradise into a nightmare, then the honey badger looks like the perfect counterpunch. This small but ferocious mammal has earned a reputation as the most fearless creature on Earth, a title even Guinness World Records officially recognizes. And once you understand how it fights and what it eats, you start to see why so many people, half-jokingly, half-seriously suggest unleashing it into the Everglades. At first glance, the honey badger doesn't look like much. About the size of a medium dog, with a stocky build and a distinctive white stripe running down its back, it could almost pass for ordinary. But appearances deceive. Behind that modest frame is a survival machine honed by evolution. Its skin is thick and loose, a kind of built-in armor. When predators bite, the badger twists inside its own hide, spinning around to counterattack. Its claws, stretching up to 1.6 inches, can dig burrows, crack open turtle shells, or tear into larger prey. Its jaws crush bones, and its diet covers almost anything, from roots and fruit to insects, rodents, birds, and carrion. What truly sets the honey badger apart, though, is its relationship with venom. It's not born immune, but generations of survival against snakes and scorpions have given it extraordinary resistance. Cubs are trained by their mothers through a brutal venom school. At first, they're introduced to weaker threats like scorpions. As they grow, they're pushed to face vipers and eventually cobras. By adulthood, a honey badger can take bites that would kill other animals. Even if the venom knocks it unconscious, it often revives hours later and resumes the fight, sometimes still clutching the same prey in its jaws. This fearlessness translates into incredible encounters. Honey badgers have been filmed raiding cobra dens, chasing hyenas from kills, and even wrestling lions to steal food. In South Africa's Kruger National Park, one was recorded dragging a python from its hiding place and killing it in a brutal showdown. 3 badgers have been seen driving off 7 lions. For them, intimidation simply doesn't exist. So, how would such an animal fare in Florida? That's where the fantasy begins. Honey badgers are no strangers to giant snakes. In Africa, they regularly battle the rock python, a predator nearly as large as Florida's Burmese python. Rock pythons average 9 to 13 feet, but can exceed 15 feet, weighing over 190 pounds. Burmese pythons, by comparison, average 16 feet in Florida, with the record hitting 19 feet. On paper, that's an even bigger opponent. But here's the twist. Most Burmese pythons in Florida are juveniles or subadults, far smaller than the giants we hear about in headlines. That means the size range overlaps almost perfectly with what honey badgers already hunt back home. And honey badgers don't just go after full-grown snakes. They raid nests, devour eggs, and hunt hatchlings before they ever reach maturity. They keep pressure on every stage of a snake's life cycle, making them unusually effective as natural controllers. Their bold, chaotic fighting style, charging, clawing, twisting, biting, throws even massive constrictors off balance. Where other predators hesitate, the honey badger doubles down. It's no wonder the internet made them a meme. The viral video, Honey Badger Don't Care, has racked up over 100 million views, turning the animal into a global symbol of recklessness and persistence. Online, people half-jokingly propose dropping squads of them into the Everglades to wage war on Florida's pythons. In theory, the matchup sounds legendary. A fearless predator built to withstand venom against one of the world's largest snakes. And unlike humans, the honey badger never quits. But while the image is irresistible, the reality is far more complicated. Because if you think a creature bold enough to attack lions will politely stick to pythons, you're in for a rude awakening. On paper, the idea seems almost elegant. Florida has a snake problem. Honey badgers eat snakes. Put the two together, and the swamp might just balance itself out again. This is the dream behind biological control. Using one species to control another, letting nature do the work that humans can't. It's not hard to imagine how the pitch would sound. Honey badgers are omnivores, willing to eat anything from rodents to reptiles. They don't just attack full-grown snakes, they raid nests, crack open eggs, and hunt the young before they ever get the chance to become giants. In theory, they'd hit Burmese pythons at every stage of their life cycle. And unlike specialized predators that depend on one food source, badgers can survive on almost anything. That means when the python population dips, they wouldn't starve. They'd just move on to the next available prey until the snakes rebound. The habitat itself wouldn't be a problem either. Honey badgers live in deserts, forests, grasslands, and mountains across Africa and Asia. Florida's subtropical swamps, with thick vegetation, high humidity, and plenty of cover, would be like a playground. They'd have space to spread, shelter to hide in, and prey at every turn. From a survival standpoint, they'd fit right in. And then there's the cost factor. Every year, Florida spends millions trying to slow the spread of invasive snakes. Traps, trained dogs, bounty programs, radio tracking. The bills pile up, yet the python numbers barely move. Compare that to a one-time introduction of a predator that never quits. Release enough honey badgers and theoretically they'd do the job for free. No more endless taxpayer spending, no more losing ground to the invasion. Just fearless little enforcers patrolling the wetlands. It sounds almost too good to be true. A self-sustaining solution to one of America's worst invasive species disasters. The kind of quick fix people desperately want when all else has failed. A way to fight biology with biology, predator against predator, fearlessness against coils. The promise of honey badgers in Florida sounds tempting, until you remember what they really are. These aren't polite, single-purpose snake hunters. They're survival machines with an appetite that knows no boundaries. In the wild, honey badgers eat over 60 different species: scorpions, lizards, frogs, rodents, birds, and their eggs. All fair game. They tear through turtles, strip carrion down to the bone, and even attack livestock like sheep and goats. Reports from India describe them digging up human graves in search of a meal. If something is edible, a honey badger won't hesitate. That's the reality of their design: opportunistic, relentless, and undiscerning. Now imagine releasing thousands of these animals into Florida, a state already bursting with fragile species. Along its coasts, 5 kinds of sea turtles nest every year: loggerheads, leatherbacks, hawksbills, green turtles, and Kemp's ridleys. 3 are officially listed as vulnerable, and 2 are critically endangered. Each summer, these turtles lay more than 68 tons of eggs along just a short stretch of the East Coast. For conservationists, every nest is a battle for survival. For a honey badger, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet. Why wrestle a 12-foot python when hundreds of unguarded eggs wait on the sand? And the story doesn't stop at turtles. American crocodiles, once nearly extinct, have clawed their way back from a few hundred individuals in the 1970s to about 2,000 adults today. But their eggs, too, would be irresistible to badgers. Crocodiles don't hide their nests well, and unlike snakes, they don't rely on ambush to survive. A honey badger could simply dig into a clutch, feast on eggs, and move on, leaving Florida's fragile crocodile population crippled. The same fate would hit inland species. Marsh rabbits, ground-nesting birds, reptiles, and even rare insects would all find themselves targeted by a predator unlike any they've encountered before. Florida isn't just any state. It's a biodiversity hotspot, home to more than 1,500 unique plant species and hundreds of animals found nowhere else in the world. Introducing a super predator would trigger a cascade of losses across this delicate food web, and it wouldn't stop with prey. And if they eat too much, even Florida's top predators, like panthers and bears, would start running out of meals. Bobcats, black bears, and Florida panthers, already struggling to survive, would suddenly find their food supplies raided. Some would be forced to retreat. Others might vanish altogether. Ecosystems aren't built to absorb chaos indefinitely, and honey badgers don't bring balance. They bring upheaval. Here's the real problem. In Florida, honey badgers wouldn't just be effective hunters, they'd be unchallenged ones. In Africa, lions, leopards, and hyenas sometimes take the risk of attacking them, though even those encounters are rare. In Florida, the list of potential enemies is short. Maybe a bobcat, a panther, a bear, or a large alligator. But panthers and bears are endangered, bobcats are in decline, and even alligators would quickly learn what lions already know. It's better not to mess with a honey badger. So instead of being saviors, honey badgers could become something worse, a new invasive predator, spreading unchecked, eating everything from turtle eggs to small mammals, from rare reptiles to endangered birds. This is the ecological domino effect. One bold predator knocks over the first piece and suddenly entire systems fall. The Everglades is already fragile from the python invasion. Add honey badgers into the mix and you don't get restoration. You get collapse. In theory, they could reduce python numbers. In practice, they'd threaten everything else. Florida wouldn't be saving its ecosystem. It would simply be trading one invasive disaster for another. If unleashing honey badgers into Florida sounds risky, history gives us a chilling preview. Over and over, humans have tried biological control, introducing one species to fight another. And almost every time, the cure turned out worse than the disease. Hawaii, in the late 1800s, offers one of the first cautionary tales. Sugarcane plantations were the backbone of the island's economy, but rats gnawed through the fields, destroying harvests. The solution seemed simple: import mongooses, small predators famous for killing snakes and rodents. Farmers thought they had found the perfect ally, but the plan ignored a critical detail. Rats are nocturnal. Mongooses hunt during the day. They rarely crossed paths. Instead of attacking rats, the mongooses turned on Hawaii's native wildlife, raiding bird nests, devouring eggs, and wiping out species found nowhere else. Sea turtle hatchlings were dug from sandy nests and eaten alive. Entire bird species unique to the islands vanished forever. More than a century later, the ecosystem still hasn't recovered. Australia's disaster was even bigger. In 1935, desperate to protect sugarcane crops from beetles, farmers released more than 2,000 cane toads imported from South America. On paper, it was brilliant, predators to eat the pests. In reality, it was chaos. The beetles lived high up on cane stalks, out of the toads' reach. The insects survived. The toads thrived. With no predators to stop them, cane toads multiplied into the millions, spreading across northern Australia like a living tide. Worse, they were toxic. Any animal that touched, licked, or swallowed one, from dingoes to crocodiles to household pets, died. Nearly a century later, Australia is still battling a plague of poisonous amphibians that never should have been there in the first place. And these aren't isolated cases. Guppies were shipped worldwide to fight mosquito larvae and control malaria. Instead, they established themselves in over 60 countries, outcompeting and threatening native fish populations. Harlequin ladybirds, once praised for eating crop pests, spread to nearly 60 nations, outmuscling local insects and even damaging agriculture. Red-bellied tilapia, released to control water weeds, exploded across Asia, the Pacific, and the Americas, consuming insect larvae meant to feed native fish. Each time, the same mistake was made, assuming that a predator introduced into a new environment would stick to the script. For every success story, there are dozens of failures. The Vidalia beetle is often hailed as one of the rare triumphs. In the late 1880s, it was introduced to California from Australia to combat the cottony cushion scale insects devastating citrus orchards. The beetle worked perfectly, wiping out the pest and saving the citrus industry. But notice the difference. This was insect against insect, a tightly controlled experiment with a clear and narrow target. When it comes to larger animals, the story almost always spirals into catastrophe. That's the warning Florida should take seriously. Releasing honey badgers wouldn't just be rolling the dice, it would be repeating the very mistakes that scarred Hawaii, Australia, and countless other places. An introduced predator doesn't politely obey human intentions. It adapts, it spreads, it rewrites the ecosystem on its own terms. History doesn't whisper here, it shouts, and the message is simple. Quick fixes in nature rarely fix anything. They open the door to chaos. If Florida ever tried releasing honey badgers, scientists already know how the story would end. The python problem wouldn't disappear. It would just be replaced by another invader, fiercer and harder to stop. To understand why people even consider honey badgers as a python solution, you have to look at how extraordinary these animals really are. They don't just survive, they dominate, using a mix of biology, brains, and sheer recklessness that makes them one of the toughest predators on the planet. Start with venom resistance. Honey badgers aren't magically immune, but they've built up defenses over generations. Cubs go through what scientists call a venom school, guided by their mothers. At first, they're exposed to scorpions, small threats that help them learn without too much risk. As they grow stronger, they're introduced to more dangerous prey, vipers, cobras, puff adders. By the time they're adults, they can withstand venom that would kill almost any other mammal. Even if a snake bite knocks them unconscious, many badgers recover within hours, shake it off, and go right back to fighting. Then there's their intelligence. Honey badgers aren't just brute force. They're clever, problem-solving creatures. In captivity, one famous badger named Stoffel became legendary for his escape artistry. Locked inside a reinforced enclosure, he dragged branches across the pen, propped them up against the fence, and climbed out. When keepers removed the branches, he stacked stones instead. When the stones were taken, he learned to dig tunnels. He even taught his partner to help with breakouts. Wildlife experts called his cage Honey Badger Alcatraz, and still, he broke free. Their anatomy is just as impressive. Their skin is thick and loose, allowing them to twist inside a predator's grip and counterattack. Their claws can reach 1.6 inches, long enough to crack open a turtle shell. They're relentless diggers, able to burrow into dens, raid nests, and uncover hidden prey. Combined with powerful jaws, they can eat everything: meat, bones, feathers, roots, and fruit. This cocktail of resilience, adaptability, and ferocity is why honey badgers inspire awe. They don't back down. They don't give up. And in battles with snakes, even giants like rock pythons, they often come out on top. But here's the paradox. The very traits that make them so effective in their native ranges are the same traits that could turn them into unstoppable invaders in Florida. A fearless predator with no limits doesn't just solve problems, it creates new ones. If honey badgers ever came to Florida, the Everglades wouldn't be their only hunting ground. Farms, ranches, and even backyards would soon be under siege. Across Africa and Asia, farmers know honey badgers not as heroes, but as vandals. In the United Arab Emirates, one farmer lost over $20,000 in just 2 years after 35 sheep were mauled. Beehives were destroyed, goats and chickens were raided, and even calves were attacked. A single honey badger can wipe out a hive in minutes, shrugging off thousands of stings to reach honey and larvae. Unlike snakes that swallow prey whole, badgers rip apart everything: meat, feathers, skin, even bones. The problem isn't just appetite, it's cunning. In South Africa, a badger named Stoffel became famous for his escapes, climbing fences, stacking tools into ladders, and digging tunnels. Imagine that level of persistence unleashed in Florida. Poultry farms, bee colonies, and backyard coops would be easy prey, and keeping them out would be nearly impossible. For Florida's economy, this could be devastating. Agriculture, cattle ranching, poultry, citrus groves, commercial beekeeping depends on stability. Honey badgers wouldn't stay hidden in the swamps like pythons. They'd wander into settlements, raid barns, and adapt to human presence. At first, Floridians might see them as python fighters, but once livestock started disappearing, the fearless savior would quickly become a menace. So if honey badgers are the wrong answer, what's the right one? The truth is, there's no single fix. Florida's python problem demands persistence and innovation. The state already pays hunters $50 for snakes under 4 feet, plus $25 per extra foot, and $200 for active nests. Thousands have been removed, but it's still just a dent. That's why scientists are investing in smarter tools. The Judas snake method, implanting trackers into males to lead researchers to breeding clusters, has proven effective. Drones with thermal cameras now scan swamps at night. Dogs are trained to sniff out hidden snakes, and AI-driven cameras are being tested to spot pythons automatically. But technology alone isn't enough. Many invasive snakes began as pets, released once they grew too large. Today, stricter rules require microchipping and tighter monitoring of exotic reptiles. But education is key. Preventing new releases is just as important as catching the snakes already in the wild. Florida's solution won't come from unleashing another predator. It will come from steady, coordinated effort, hunters, science, policy, and public awareness working together. It's not flashy, but it's the only path forward. The thought of unleashing honey badgers into Florida is both thrilling and terrifying. On the surface, it feels like poetic justice. Pit the most fearless animal alive against the most destructive invader in the Everglades. A battle of legends, mammal versus serpent, chaos against coils. But when you step back, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Honey badgers might fight pythons, yes. They might even kill some. But they wouldn't stop there. They'd raid turtle nests, plunder crocodile eggs, devastate bird colonies, and harass farmers' livestock. In a state already struggling to protect endangered species and fragile habitats, they'd become yet another invader, a problem stacked on top of the python crisis. And unlike snakes, honey badgers are clever. Once established, they'd be almost impossible to contain. History has already gave us the warnings. Mongooses in Hawaii, cane toads in Australia, tilapia in rivers worldwide. Each time the plan looked smart, and each time it spiraled into ecological catastrophe. Honey badgers would write the same story, only louder. They'd reshape Florida's biodiversity in ways we couldn't predict, and by the time the damage became clear, it would be too late to reverse. So where does that leave Florida? With the hard path, the slow, steady grind of science, technology, and policy. Hunters tracking pythons by hand, drones scanning swamps at night, dogs sniffing out hidden invaders, laws preventing pet releases, and communities that understand just how fragile their paradise really is. It's not as flashy as a fearless honey badger charging into the swamp, but it's the only real solution. Because ecosystems don't need heroes. They need balance, patience, and respect. Florida's fight against the python invasion is far from over, but one truth stands firm. Adding another predator into the mix isn't the answer. It's a reminder of a bigger lesson, that nature doesn't respond to shortcuts. The Everglades can still be defended, but only if humans resist the temptation of quick fixes and commit to protecting what's left, one step at a time. So the final verdict? Releasing thousands of honey badgers into Florida wouldn't be bold. It would be madness. If this wild scenario made you stop and think, hit like, share it so others get the warning, and subscribe for more untold truths. What's your verdict? Saviors or destroyers?